Marcus Drake woke 3 minutes before the knock. His body, trained by war and sharpened by grief, sensed disturbance before sound reached consciousness. Beside him, Ranger lifted his head, ears forward, alert. The blizzard outside howled at 140 miles per hour, burying the Colorado Rockies under 6 feet of snow. No one could survive out there. No one should be knocking. The cabin stood at 9,000 feet, 15 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a single dirt road now buried beneath winter's fury. Marcus had chosen this isolation deliberately 3 years ago, after the funeral, after the VA counselor's useless words about healing and moving forward. Mountains didn't ask questions. Silence didn't demand explanations. The dead stayed buried, and the living learned to stop living. Ranger's growl started low, insistent. The German shepherd's black and gray coat bristled, his stance shifting from sleep to combat readiness in seconds. 6 years of military service had taught the dog to distinguish between wind and threat. This was threat. Marcus swung his legs off the cot, bare feet hitting frozen floorboards. At 37, he still carried the frame of a Navy SEAL, broad shoulders, lean muscle, hands that remembered how to break bones and save lives with equal precision. But the sharp angles of his face had softened with loss. Dark blonde hair grown uneven, beard untrimmed. His blue-gray eyes held the particular emptiness of a man who'd loved deeply and learned the canon. The knock came again. 3 soft taps, barely audible through the storm's roar. Then stillness. Marcus grabbed his Sig Sauer from beneath the pillow, moved to the door with muscle memory overriding 3 years of rust. Ranger stayed tight at his heel, a silent guardian whose breath misted in the frigid air. The thermometer outside read -30 degrees. Wind chill pushed it lower. Frostbite claimed fingers and minutes at this temperature. Death followed in less than an hour. When Marcus opened the door, winter fell into his arms. A woman, skeletal, frozen, barely alive, collapsed forward. 4 children clung to her like drowning sailors to wreckage. The toddler's lips were blue. Not pale blue. Corpse blue. Marcus's combat training activated before thought. He caught the woman with one knee arm, felt her weight, maybe 90 pounds, starvation thin, and pulled her inside. The children followed, stumbling across the threshold as though entering another world. The oldest, a girl maybe 9 years old, held the hands of 2 small boys who moved in identical, terrified synchronization. Twins. The toddler remained motionless in the woman's arms, eyes half closed, breathing shallow. Ranger circled them once, nose lowered, checking each small face with instinctive triage protocol. The dog made no threatening move, only positioned himself between Marcus and the children, while his body language screamed assessment rather than aggression. Marcus had 8 minutes to save the toddler's life, 15 to prevent permanent brain damage in the twins. He didn't know it yet, but opening this door would drag him into a war he'd sworn never to fight again. The cabin's interior was barely warmer than outside. Marcus kept the fire low, heating only enough space to survive. But compared to the blizzard, it was sanctuary. He kicked the door shut, cutting off the wind's scream, and laid the woman on the floor near the wood stove. Her skin was gray-white, frost crystallized in her long black hair, eyelashes rimmed with ice. She wore a torn jacket insufficient for Colorado winter, jeans soaked through, sneakers instead of boots. The 9-year-old girl stood rigid, watching Marcus with eyes too old for childhood. Her chestnut hair hung in tangled mats, cheeks hollow, but her posture remained protective despite visible exhaustion. She held the twins' hands so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Marcus pointed to the cot. His voice came out rough from disuse. "Sit. Don't move." The girl obeyed, pulling the twins with her. They wore mismatched clothes, summer weight shirts under thin windbreakers, sneakers with holes, no gloves. Their lips trembled between blue and purple, small bodies shaking violently. One twin had wet himself, urine frozen against his jeans. The other's teeth chattered so hard Marcus heard them clicking across the room. The toddler required immediate intervention. Marcus took her from the unconscious woman's arms, assessed quickly. Female, approximately 2 years old. Core body temperature likely around 94 degrees based on skin touch and presentation. Severe hypothermia, minutes from cardiac arrest. He'd seen this in Afghanistan. Locals caught in mountain storms, children especially vulnerable. The protocol was counterintuitive. No direct heat, no hot water, nothing that would shock the system into shutdown. Gradual rewarming only. Marcus stripped the toddler's wet clothes with practiced efficiency, wrapped her in his own flannel shirt, still warm from his body, then layered a wool blanket over that. He filled a water bottle with lukewarm water from the kettle, not hot, just above room temperature, and tucked it against her chest under the blankets. Then he placed her on the cot between the twins, using their combined body heat as additional warming. Ranger jumped up without invitation, positioned himself along the toddler's back, adding his own warmth to the equation. The dog's brown eyes met Marcus's with understanding. They'd run this drill before in other mountains, other wars. The woman on the floor stirred, lips moving soundlessly. Marcus knelt, checked her pulse, weak but steady, and began the same protocol. He stripped her wet outer layers, wrapped her in dry blankets from his footlocker, positioned another warm water bottle against her core. Her hands showed early frostbite, fingers white and waxy. She'd lose sensation, maybe permanent nerve damage, but she'd keep the fingers if he worked fast. The twins needed attention next. Marcus gestured to the 9-year-old girl. "Help me, take off their wet clothes, slowly, don't rub their skin." The girl moved with practiced efficiency, as though she'd done this before. She peeled frozen fabric from her brothers' bodies with gentle hands, whispering to them in Spanish. Soft, soothing sounds Marcus didn't understand but recognized as comfort. The twins didn't cry. That worried him. Children in shock didn't cry. Marcus provided dry clothes from his own limited supply, t-shirts that hung like dresses on their small frames, wool socks pulled up to their knees. He wrapped them together in a single blanket, creating a cocoon of shared warmth, and positioned them near the wood stove at a safe distance. Too close meant burns. Too far meant ineffective heating. The 9-year-old girl refused dry clothes. "I'm okay," she said, her English clear but accented. "Take care of them first." Her body contradicted the words. Shivering, pale, lips tinged blue, but her eyes remained steady. Marcus recognized that look. He'd worn it himself in combat, the stubborn insistence that others' survival mattered more than his own. He threw a blanket around her shoulders anyway, poured lukewarm sugar water into a cup. The body needed fuel to generate heat, and pressed it into her hands. "Drink, slow sips, don't argue." She drank, gaze never leaving her siblings. The twins had curled together like puppies, eyes closing despite their shivers. The toddler's breathing had deepened slightly, color beginning to return to her lips. Still blue, but lighter. Progress. Marcus fed the wood stove, building the fire carefully. Too much heat too fast would be dangerous for hypothermia victims, but the cabin needed to reach at least 60 degrees to sustain recovery. He worked methodically, splitting kindling, arranging logs, adjusting airflow, while his mind cataloged inconsistencies. Wrong shoes for hiking, no gear. Children malnourished for weeks, not days. The 9-year-old's defensive posture. The way the woman had whispered please with her first conscious breath, not help or thank you, but please as though begging for something more than rescue. These weren't lost hikers. These were refugees. 4 hours passed. Marcus worked in silence, monitoring temperatures, replacing water bottles as they cooled, checking pulses and breathing. The woman regained consciousness around 4 a.m., eyes fluttering open in confusion before focusing on Marcus with sharp, immediate fear. "Don't move," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "You're hypothermic. Movement can trigger cardiac arrest." She froze, then whispered through cracked lips. "My children?" "Alive, recovering. The baby's critical, but stable." Relief flooded her face, followed immediately by fresh terror. She tried to sit up, gasped at the pain, fell back. "Please, don't call anyone. Don't. He'll find us. He'll kill us all." Marcus saw the bruises then. Removing her wet jacket had revealed them. Dark purple marks around her upper arms in the distinctive shape of fingers, yellowing bruises along her ribs, a handprint on her left shoulder. Not from wilderness. From fists. Professional fists that knew exactly where to hit so clothing would hide the evidence. Ranger moved closer to the woman, sniffing carefully, then looked at Marcus with an expression the dog wore in combat zones when identifying threats. The woman wasn't the danger. Someone else was. Marcus kept his voice steady. "No one's finding you in this storm. Roads are buried. We're alone. The woman's eyes closed, tears leaking from the corners. Thank you, she breathed. Thank you. She lost consciousness again, but her breathing remained steady. Crisis passing. Marcus returned to monitoring the children, checking the toddler's temperature every 15 minutes. By dawn, her core temp had risen to 96 degrees, still hypothermic, but out of the immediate danger zone. The twins had stopped shivering violently, curled together in exhausted sleep. Only the 9-year-old girl remained awake, watching Marcus with unwavering vigilance. You can sleep, Marcus told her. You're safe here. That's what people always say. Her voice carried bitter knowledge no child should possess. Then he finds us. Marcus met her gaze, recognized the calculation happening behind those two old eyes. She was measuring him, deciding if he was threat or ally, preparing to fight or flee despite her exhaustion. Who's looking for you? The girl's jaw set. If you hurt my mom, I'll kill you. Dead serious. 9 years old with a killer's eyes. Marcus had seen that look before in war zones. Children who'd witnessed enough violence to understand mortality as concrete fact rather than abstract concept. I'm not going to hurt anyone, but I need to know what I'm protecting you from. The girl studied him for a long moment, then looked away. A monster, and monsters don't stop. Dawn broke gray and furious. The blizzard showed no signs of weakening. Marcus checked his supplies. Enough food for one person for 2 months, now feeding 6. Enough firewood for 3 weeks if he rationed. The radio reported roads closed, avalanche warnings, storm expected to last another 48 to 72 hours. They were trapped together. The question was whether that trap held safety or simply delayed inevitable disaster. The woman woke fully around mid-morning, more alert, capable of sitting up with assistance. Marcus helped her to the cot, poured weak broth from his meager pantry, watched her hands shake as she lifted the cup. She was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe 29, with delicate features and long black hair that would be beautiful when not matted with ice and grime. Her dark eyes held the particular wariness of prey animals, constant scanning, measuring exits, calculating threats. I'm Elena, she said softly. Elena Torres. This is Maya, the 9-year-old, and Caleb and Connor, the twins, and Grace, the toddler, still sleeping against Ranger's warm bulk. Marcus nodded. Marcus Drake, this is Ranger. Elena's eyes went to the din, softened slightly. He saved Grace, kept her warm. He's good at his job. What is his job? Same as mine used to be, protect people. Elena absorbed that, seemed to find some reassurance in it. She sipped the broth, grimaced at the taste but forced it down. Her body needed calories, liquid, warmth. Marcus had added salt to replace electrolytes lost through exposure. Maya moved closer to her mother, pressed against her side with desperate need. Elena wrapped one arm around her daughter, whispered something in Spanish that made Maya's rigid posture ease fractionally. The twins stirred, woke, saw their mother conscious, and immediately scrambled to her. She gathered them carefully, mindful of her frostbitten fingers, and held all 3 older children while Grace slept on. Marcus busied himself with cabin maintenance, giving them privacy for reunion. He replenished the wood stove, checked the exterior shutters, confirmed the storm still raged. His mind worked through logistics, food rationing, water supply, sleeping arrangements. 5 unexpected guests in a one-room cabin built for isolation. The practical problems were manageable, the emotional ones less so. 3 years since he'd shared space with another human. 3 years since he'd allowed himself to care whether anyone lived or died. He'd climbed to 9,000 feet specifically to avoid connections, responsibilities, the risk of loss. Now 4 children and a desperate woman occupied his cabin, disrupting the careful numbness he'd cultivated. Caleb, the bolder twin, spoke first. His voice came out small, uncertain. Are you going to call the police? Marcus turned from the stove. Why would I call the police? Because Mom took us. That's what Dad said. She kidnapped us. Connor, the quieter twin, nodded. Dad said we have to go home. Elena's face went white. Maya's expression hardened into something ancient and cold. Marcus understood then, not hikers, not random refugees. This was an escape, a desperate, possibly illegal flight from something the children called Dad, with voices that mixed fear and conditioning in equal measure. Marcus kept his tone neutral. "How old are you boys?" "6," they answered in unison. "6 is old enough to know if you're kidnapped. Do you feel kidnapped?" Caleb considered, looked at his mother, then back to Marcus. "No, I feel away." "Away from what?" Connor's small voice barely reached across the cabin. "From yelling and hitting and scared." Maya's hand had moved to her pocket, fingers closing around something hidden there. A weapon, Marcus realized. This 9-year-old child carried a knife, and from her posture knew how to use it. Elena spoke, her voice steadier than her hands. "We got lost hiking. The storm caught us. That's all." The lie was transparent. Wrong shoes, no gear, children showing signs of chronic malnourishment and trauma. Marcus didn't challenge it. She'd tell the truth when ready, or she wouldn't. Either way, he now understood the stakes. This wasn't about getting lost. This was about staying lost. "Storm should break in 2, maybe 3 days," Marcus said. "Roads need another week to clear after that. You're stuck here. We make the best of it." Relief and terror warred across Elena's features. You won't tell anyone?" "Tell them what? That I found 5 people dying in a blizzard and saved their lives? Nobody needs to know anything beyond that." Maya's hand relaxed slightly, moving away from the hidden knife. Connor leaned into his mother's side. Caleb watched Marcus with new assessment, calculating whether trust was possible. Only Grace remained oblivious, sleeping peacefully against Ranger, her tiny hand tangled in the dog's fur. The first day established routines born of necessity. Marcus gave up his cot to Elena and the children, made himself a bedroll on the floor near the wood stove. He cooked simple meals, canned soup stretched with rice, crackers rationed carefully, and watched the family eat with desperate hunger barely controlled. Maya ate last, only after confirming her siblings had enough. The twins ate quickly, protectively, as though expecting food to be taken away. Grace, once awake, proved finicky, refusing vegetables until Marcus mixed them with applesauce. Elena tried to help, but her frostbitten fingers couldn't grip properly. The sensation would return over days or weeks, nerves reawakening slowly. Marcus showed her how to exercise them gently, flexing and stretching to encourage blood flow without forcing damaged tissue. She followed instructions with the obedience of someone accustomed to following instructions, then caught herself, stiffened, forced more independence into her posture. By evening, the cabin had grown almost warm. 45 degrees, Arctic compared to before, tropical compared to outside. The children's color improved, shivering decreased, but deeper cold remained in their eyes, the kind that came from months or years, not hours. Marcus read to them before bed the only book he owned, a field guide to Rocky Mountain wildlife, and watched the twins lean into his voice like starving creatures toward food. Maya listened from her vigilant post, pretending disinterest, absorbing every word. Elena sat against the wall, watching her children with an expression Marcus recognized from his own mirror 3 years ago. The look of someone who'd already lost everything and was terrified of losing it again. At 3 a.m., Elena screamed. Marcus came awake with his weapon drawn before conscious thought registered. Ranger barked once, sharp, alerting. The children stirred, Maya sitting bolt upright, the twins whimpering. Elena thrashed on the cot, eyes closed, locked in nightmare. Her voice emerged raw and terrified. "David, please, not the kids, please, not the kids." Maya was already there, hands on her mother's shoulders, voice low and practiced. Mom, wake up. You're safe. He's not here. We got away." Elena's eyes snapped open, wild, unfocused. She grabbed Maya's arms hard enough to leave marks. Then recognition flooded in and she released, gasping. "Sorry, baby. Sorry." "It's okay, Mom. Just a dream." Elena's breathing slowly steadied. She looked around the dim cabin, saw Marcus standing in the shadows with lowered weapon, saw the twins crying quietly, saw Grace miraculously still asleep. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." Maya held her mother, rocked her gently, and Marcus watched a child comfort an adult with skills that came from terrible repetition. This was routine for them. How many nights had Maya done this before? Marcus returned his weapon to its place, fed the wood stove, gave them space. But he'd heard the name, David, and he'd heard the plea. Not stop hitting me, but not the kids. As though Elena's own suffering was acceptable, but her children's remained the line she'd tried to defend. Morning brought Maya to his side while the others slept. She stood straight-backed, jaw set, and asked the question he'd been waiting for. Who's David? Marcus kept his voice neutral. You tell me. The man who's going to kill us when he finds us. Why would he do that? Maya's laugh held no humor. Because Mom left him, because we helped her leave, because he owns us and nobody takes what's his. Nobody owns people. That's what Mom said. David didn't agree. Marcus let silence stretch, giving Maya space to fill it if she chose. She did, words tumbling out with the relief of finally telling someone who might listen. He's a sheriff's deputy, has been for 10 years. Everyone likes him. Church, work, the whole town. Perfect husband, perfect father. Except at home. Maya's hands clenched. At home, he breaks things. Breaks Mom. Tried to break us. She pulled up her sleeve, revealed cigarette burns in neat rows along her forearm. This was for interfering, for standing between him and Mom. He said it was my fault for making him angry. Marcus's military training kept his expression neutral despite the rage building in his chest. How long? 7 years. Since he married Mom. It got worse after Grace was born. Mom tried to leave 3 times. Police brought her back. They're David's friends. Last time? 3 weeks ago. Waited for the storm. David wouldn't expect us to run in a blizzard. Figured we'd die or he'd find us. Either way, better than staying. Maya's 9-year-old logic was sound and horrifying. Death in a snowstorm preferable to another night in that house. Marcus had seen combat veterans with less stark survival calculations. Your mom know you're telling me this? She thinks hiding keeps us safe. But you're military, I can tell. You know hiding just delays the inevitable. Maya's eyes met his. So I'm asking straight. When David comes, and he will come, will you fight or will you hand us over? Children shouldn't have to ask questions like that. Children shouldn't understand betrayal as default expectation. But Marcus had learned long ago that war made adults of anyone caught in its radius, regardless of age. I don't hand over people who need protection. Even if it's illegal, we're not your family. You don't owe us anything. Marcus thought of Benjamin, 6 years old, same age as the twins. Thought of Rachel, whose last words had been, take care of yourself, as though she'd known he'd need permission to keep living. Thought of 3 years spent dying slowly because survival without purpose felt like failure. Sometimes the law and what's right don't align. Maya studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, then we stay until the storm breaks and we figure out where to go next. Or you stay longer until it's safe. It'll never be safe. David doesn't quit. Marcus had faced enemies who didn't quit, had been that enemy himself, relentless in pursuit of mission completion. The difference between David Mercer and Marcus Drake was that Marcus had fought for something larger than himself. David fought to own, control, dominate. That made him predictable. And predictability could be exploited. Then we make it safe, Marcus said quietly. That's what I'm good at. For the first time, something like hope flickered across Maya's ancient eyes. She didn't smile. Smiles had probably been beaten out of her years ago. But her shoulders lowered fractionally, tension easing by degrees. The next 2 weeks established new patterns. Lena healed slowly, frostbite receding, strength returning. She helped where she could, cooking, cleaning, managing the younger children while Marcus taught the older ones practical skills. Caleb and Connor learned to split kindling, stack firewood, maintain the stove. Simple tasks that gave them purpose and kept their hands busy. Maya absorbed advanced lessons, basic navigation, weather reading, emergency shelter construction. Skills for survival if they had to run again. Grace attached herself to Ranger with single-minded devotion. The dog tolerated tiny hands pulling his fur, accepted sticky kisses with patient dignity, and positioned himself as perpetual guardian whenever the toddler moved. Marcus watched the bond form, and thought of Benjamin, who'd begged for a dog the Christmas before the accident. One more thing lost to bad timing and drunk drivers. Elena checked the windows every 20 minutes. Compulsive behavior she tried to hide but couldn't control. She'd freeze mid-task, move to peer through shutters at the snow-buried landscape, scan for threats that weren't there yet. Marcus recognized hypervigilance from his own mirror. She was waiting for David, expecting him, knowing he'd come. Father Brennan arrived on day 15, the first person to reach the cabin after the storm finally broke. The priest drove a modified snowmobile, pulling a small sled laden with supplies. He was 68, weathered as the mountains themselves, with kind eyes and a chaplain's understanding of when to ask questions and when to simply provide. "Heard you had company," Brennan said, stomping snow from his boots. "Thought you might need extras." Marcus accepted the supplies, food, medical items, children's clothes somehow procured, and introduced Elena as his distant cousin from New Mexico, visiting with her kids when the storm hit. The lie came smoothly, necessary fiction for survival. Brennan's eyes took in the situation. Scared children, traumatized woman, Marcus's protective stance, and accepted the story without challenge. "Glad everyone's safe," Brennan said simply. "Nasty storm. Lost 3 hikers over by Echo Ridge." Elena paled. Brennan noticed, softened his tone. "Not trying to scare you, just, you're lucky Marcus was here. Most isolated cabins are abandoned this time of year." After Brennan left, Elena pulled Marcus aside. "He knows. The priest knows we're lying. Probably. He'll tell someone. He won't. Brennan was Army chaplain before he found God. Some things you learn in service stick, like when to protect people instead of procedures." Elena wanted to believe that. Marcus saw the hope and doubt warring across her features. She'd learned the hard way that institutions protected themselves, not victims. That authority figures closed ranks. That speaking truth often brought punishment instead of help. The twins thrived under Marcus's quiet attention. Caleb's natural boldness returned gradually, asking questions, exploring boundaries. Connor remained watchful but began to relax, laughing occasionally at Ranger's antics. Both boys started calling Marcus Mr. Marcus, then just Marcus, with increasing familiarity. They shadowed him during chores, mimicked his movements, soaked up male attention that came without violence attached. Maya remained vigilant, but began to lower her guard in increments. She showed Marcus her drawings, dark, violent images of shadowy figures and running children, and he looked at each one carefully, finding technical skill beneath the trauma. She drew what she'd lived. Someday, if they survived, maybe she'd draw what she imagined instead. Grace spoke her first full sentence at 3 weeks. Marcus was showing the twins how to check ice thickness when Grace toddled over, grabbed his leg, and announced with perfect clarity, "My papa." The cabin went silent. Lena froze at the stove. Maya looked up from her book. The twins stared at their little sister with wide eyes. Grace, oblivious to the weight of her words, simply beamed up at Marcus with toddler certainty. Marcus's throat closed. Benjamin had called him Papa. Rachel had insisted on it, said Dad was too distant, Daddy too juvenile. Papa struck the balance between affection and respect. Hearing it now from this tiny survivor who'd nearly died in his arms broke something open inside Marcus's chest that he'd thought sealed permanently. Elena spoke carefully. "Grace, sweetie, that's Mr. Marcus." "Papa," Grace insisted, patting Marcus's knee for emphasis. Marcus knelt slowly, met Grace's eyes. "I'm not your papa, little one." Grace's face scrunched in confusion, then determination. "My papa. You take care. You safe." Children Grace's age didn't understand biological relationships, only functional ones. Papa meant protector, provider, the person who kept monsters away. Marcus had been those things. In Grace's simple worldview, that made him Papa. Marcus looked at Elena. "I don't want to confuse her." Elena's eyes held complicated emotions. Gratitude, grief, fear of hope. "She's 2. She calls Ranger doggy and the stove hot box. She'll learn the distinction eventually." But Grace didn't learn the distinction. As days passed, Marcus became Papa, specifically, permanently, irrevocably. The twins picked up the habit by proximity. Even Maya, resistant to any vulnerability, occasionally slipped and used the word before correcting herself. Elena tried to redirect, gave up, accepted this strange new reality where her children adopted a stranger as father figure because biology didn't define family, protection did. At 3 a.m. on day 26, Marcus heard Ranger's warning growl seconds before his own instincts registered wrong. He moved to the window, peered through shutters, and saw what Elena had been expecting and all along. Snowmobile tracks, fresh, circling the property. Someone had found them. Marcus woke Elena first, hand over her mouth to prevent sound. Her eyes snapped open in terror before recognizing him in the darkness. He whispered against her ear, "Someone's outside, circling. Get the children ready to move." Elena's face drained of color, but she nodded. Years of survival had taught her to obey crisis commands without question. She slipped from the cot, began waking the children with gentle urgency while Marcus moved to the weapons locker. 3 hunting rifles, his service sidearm, ammunition stored separately as safety protocol demanded. He loaded the Sig Sauer, pocketed extra magazines, kept movement silent and economical. Ranger positioned himself at the door, hackles raised, teeth bared in soundless warning. The dog knew combat protocols, no barking to reveal position, aggression held in reserve until necessary. Marcus checked the perimeter through each window, cataloging what he saw. Single snowmobile track, deliberate pattern, methodical search rather than random approach. Professional reconnaissance. David Mercer was either military trained or working with someone who was. The tracks ended 200 yards from the cabin, engine killed to approach on foot. Smart. Engines gave away position. Marcus scanned the tree line, caught movement against snow. Dark shape, human-sized, watching. Maya appeared at his elbow, already dressed, knife visible now in her belt. She'd stopped hiding it after Marcus proved trustworthy. Is it him? Don't know yet. Could be anyone. It's him. I can feel it. Marcus didn't dismiss her instinct. Children who survived abuse develop preternatural threat awareness. Their nervous systems stayed perpetually activated, reading danger in patterns invisible to others. If Maya felt David, David was probably out there. The shape in the trees moved closer. Marcus tracked through rifle scope, got a clear view. Male, approximately 6 feet, winter gear, no visible weapons, but posture suggested concealed carry. The man's body language radiated authority and entitlement. Cop stance, Marcus recognized it from 1,000 interactions. The man stopped 50 yards out, pulled out a radio, spoke into it. Marcus couldn't hear words through the cabin walls, but intent was clear, calling for backup or reporting position. Either way, time was running short. Elena gathered the children in the corner farthest from windows. Caleb and Connor clung to her, silent, eyes huge. Grace buried her face in Elena's shoulder. Maya stood separate, watching Marcus with the intensity of a soldier awaiting orders. The man outside waited, patient, confident, letting his presence sink in, psychological pressure before physical confrontation. Classic intimidation tactic. Marcus had used it himself in hostage negotiations. Let them know you're there. Let them imagine worst outcomes. Let fear do the work before violence became necessary. Dawn broke slowly. Gray light revealed the man more clearly. Broad shoulders, clean cut, expensive winter gear. Wedding ring glinted on his left hand. He stood absolutely still, staring at the cabin, waiting for response. When none came, he walked forward with deliberate casualty, stopped 10 feet from the door. His voice carried clearly through the walls. "Marcus Drake, I know you're in there. I'm Sheriff's Deputy David Mercer. I'm here about my family." Elena's sharp intake of breath confirmed identity. Maya's hand went to her knife. The twins started crying silently, tears streaming without sound. Grace remained frozen against her mother's chest. Marcus kept his rifle trained on the door, spoke loud enough to penetrate wood. "You're on private property. Turn around and leave." David's laugh held ugly amusement. "Private property, I've got every legal right to search. Missing persons case, my wife and children, kidnapped 3 weeks ago. Anonymous tip said they might be here. No one here matching that description. Then you won't mind if I come in and verify, just doing my job, protecting citizens." Marcus calculated angles. David wanted inside to confirm identities. established legal grounds for removal, but entering without warrant would compromise any case he built. So why risk it? Because David didn't plan to build a case. He planned to take them by force and deal with consequences later. Cops protected their own. Marcus had seen it in war zones, American forces closing ranks when one of theirs stepped over the line. David was counting on that institutional protection. "You got a warrant, deputy?" Pause. Then David's voice hardened. "Don't need one for exigent circumstances. I've got reasonable belief children are in danger." "From what?" "From you. Unstable veteran living alone in the mountains. PTSD, probably armed, possibly delusional. Makes you a threat." David had done his research. Knew Marcus's history, vulnerabilities, psychological pressure points. The PTSD label was weapon, wielded strategically. Society loved veterans in parades, feared them in isolation. One man's hero was another man's dangerous instability waiting to explode. Marcus's jaw tightened. His finger stayed off the trigger through discipline alone. "Walk away, Mercer. Nothing here for you." "Then prove it. Open the door. Let me see with my own eyes. Or I call state police, they bring the whole circus. Either way, I'm seeing inside that cabin." Elena moved to Marcus's side, shaking but determined. She kept her voice low. "He'll take them. The law's on his side." "Not all laws are just." "That doesn't matter when he's the one with the badge." Marcus knew she was right. David held institutional power. Uniform, weapon, radio, backup he could summon with one call. Marcus held moral authority in a cabin full of scared children. In any official confrontation, David won by default. But confrontations didn't have to be official. Marcus lowered his rifle, unlocked the door, stepped outside alone. He left the Sig Sauer visible in his waistband, not brandishing, just present. David's eyes tracked the weapon, assessed threat level, relaxed fractionally when Marcus kept his hands empty and open. Close up, David Mercer looked exactly like what he was. Handsome, fit, charming when he chose to be. Probably the church volunteer who fixed elderly widows' fences, the colleague who brought donuts to shift changes, the neighbor who smiled at everyone's kids. Oval rarely announced itself with horns and pitchforks. It wore nice guy masks and community service awards. David smiled. Practiced, empty, predatory. "See, cooperation makes everything easier. Now let's have a civilized conversation." Man to man. Marcus closed the door behind him, putting himself between David and the cabin. His body language read clear. "You're not getting past without going through me. Talk fast. I've got breakfast burning." David's smile widened. "I know my wife and children are inside. I know you've been harboring them for 3 weeks. What I don't know is whether you're complicit in kidnapping or just a good Samaritan who got in over his head. If they're here, hypothetically, maybe they don't want to be found. My wife is mentally ill, depression, paranoid delusions, has been for years. I've been trying to get her help, but she refuses treatment. Now she's dragged our kids into her fantasy. They need to come home, get proper care." The story was smooth, practiced, probably repeated to family courts and police departments for years. It had the weight of official narrative, documented mental health history, concerned husband, children caught in middle. Only problem was, Marcus had seen the cigarette burns on Maya's arms, had watched Elena check windows every 20 minutes, had heard David's name screamed in night terrors. Mental illness didn't leave those kinds of marks. "Sounds like you should handle that through proper channels. File custody petition, get a judge involved." Already did. "Court dates next week, but I'd rather handle this family matter privately. Bring them home. We forget this whole thing happened. You get to go back to your isolation. Nobody files charges. Clean resolution." David stepped closer, dropped his voice to confidential tone. "Look, Drake, I respect your service, military brotherhood and all that, but you're being used. Elena's good at manipulation. Made me believe she loved me for 7 years before I realized she was poison. She's doing the same to you, playing victim, making you think you're rescuing someone." Marcus's hands flexed, muscle memory reaching for weapons he'd left inside. David noticed, smiled wider. "There it is, The violence underneath. You think you're better than me, soldier? You think your killings were righteous because they happened overseas? David's mask slipped, revealing the cruelty beneath. I know your file. Dishonorable discharge pending psych evaluation. 3 weeks before your wife and kid died. Funny coincidence, isn't it? You losing control, then them dying in an accident? Marcus's vision narrowed. His service record was sealed. Accessing it required federal clearance or illegal database breaches. David had friends in high places, or he was dirty enough to buy access. Either way, he'd weaponize Marcus's past, aiming for psychological weak points. The discharge had been pending, not dishonorable. Medical separation for PTSD, perfectly honorable. Documentation of service-related injury. But bureaucratic delays had stretched the process. Then Rachel and Benjamin died, and Marcus stopped caring about paperwork. Let it lapse. Let everything lapse. David kept pushing. Wife took your son to visit her mother, maybe to get away from you, maybe scared of what you'd become. We'll never know, but that drunk driver, convenient, wasn't it? Taking away the witnesses to whatever was happening in your home. Marcus's fist connected with David's jaw before conscious thought registered. Military training overridden by rage, grief, protective fury at someone desecrating Rachel's memory. David went down hard, blood spraying from split lip, snow cushioning impact. Marcus stood over him, shaking, knowing he'd just handed David exactly what he wanted. Evidence of violence, proof of instability, justification for whatever came next. David spat blood, laughed through broken teeth. There's the real Marcus Drake, not the noble protector, just another violent man who thinks his pain excuses his actions. He pulled himself upright, still smiling. Thank you. You just made my case. Marcus realized his mistake too late. David's body camera was recording. Had been recording since he approached the cabin. Every word, every gesture, now documented, including assault on a law enforcement officer. David keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Mercer. I'm at the Drake residence. Suspect became violent during questioning. Request backup and CPS response. We've got 4 minors in potentially dangerous situation. Static crackled, then calm female voice. Copy, Deputy Mercer. Units en route, ETA 20 minutes. David met Marcus's eyes, triumph undisguised. 20 minutes, then my family comes home. And you? You get arrested for assault. Maybe they'll find more charges once they dig deeper. Either way, you're done. Marcus's mind raced through options. He could run with Elena and the children, but where? Storm had passed, but mountains remained treacherous. David had backup coming, probably helicopter if state police responded. They'd be tracked, caught within hours. He could barricade inside, but that made him hostage taker instead of protector. Brought tactical teams, escalation, probable death. Or he could let it play out. Trust the system Elena had already told him was rigged. Watch David take the children back to the house where cigarettes burned 9-year-old arms. The door opened. Sheriff Tom Walsh stepped out, service weapon holstered, hands empty, invisible. He was 60, gray-haired, competent eyes that had seen everything rural Colorado offered, domestic disputes, meth labs, occasional violence. He looked at David's split lip, at Marcus's bloody knuckles, assessed the situation with practiced speed. Tom, David's voice shifted to relief and camaraderie. Thank God, Drake just assaulted me. We need to get Elena and the kids out of there before he escalates. Walsh ignored David, spoke directly to Marcus. That true? You hit him? Marcus weighed truth versus tactics, chose honesty. He accused me of killing my wife and son, implied I was abuser. I lost control. It was wrong. Walsh nodded slowly, turned to David. Your lips split. You want to press charges? Damn right I do. Assault on a peace officer, and we need CPS here now. You called for backup? Walsh interrupted. Of course I called. Without coordinating with my office first. On my jurisdiction. During a sensitive family welfare check. Walsh's tone stayed calm, but authority underneath was steel. That's not protocol, Dave. David's friendly mask slipped again, irritation bleeding through. Tom, with all due respect, those are my children. I don't need permission to. You need a warrant to enter private property. You need my authorization to request state resources. And you sure as hell need better judgment than to conduct solo welfare checks on armed veterans before dawn. Walsh gestured to the body camera. That recording's going to show you initiated contact, escalated through provocation, then called for tactical response when the civilian reacted exactly how you expected. That's entrapment, Dave, not law enforcement. David's expression hardened. You're seriously going to take his side? He's harboring my kidnapped family. You filed a missing persons report? Pause. Not officially. I was hoping to resolve this privately, so they're not missing. They're just somewhere you don't approve of. Walsh crossed his arms. Elena's an adult. She can go where she wants. Kids are with their mother. Unless you've got custody orders saying otherwise, there's no kidnapping here. She's unstable. Then petition family court. Go through proper channels. But you don't conduct armed confrontations on private property because your wife left you. Walsh's words hung in frigid air. David realized he had lost tactical advantage, tried to recover. I have reasonable suspicion children are in danger. A veteran with documented PTSD is not automatically dangerous. And you don't get to weaponize his service record to justify a legal search. Walsh's voice hardened. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to cancel that backup request. Then you're going to leave Drake's property. When you've got proper documentation, custody order, welfare warrant, something official, you come back through my office. Until then, you're off this mountain. Clear? David's jaw clenched. His eyes promised retribution, but Walsh outranked him, and refusing direct order from superior would end his career faster than anything Marcus could do. Crystal clear, Sheriff. David stalked to his snowmobile, gunned the engine, disappeared into tree line. But his parting look toward the cabin carried unmistakable message. This isn't over. Walsh waited until the engine noise faded, then addressed Marcus. Get inside, we need to talk. The cabin felt smaller with Walsh filling space. Elena stood protectively in front of the children, Maya positioned to fight despite her size. The twins hiding behind their mother, Grace clutching Ranger's fur. Walsh took it all in, impromptu family, obvious terror, defensive postures, and his experienced cop brain processed what official reports wouldn't say. Elena Torres? Elena nodded, voice barely audible. Yes, sir. You're here voluntarily? Yes. Kids being cared for properly? Fed? Housed? Safe? Better than they've been in years. Walsh looked at the children, addressed them directly. Anyone here hurt you? Touch you wrong? Scare you? Four heads shook in unison. Maya found her voice. He saved us. We were dying. Marcus saved us. Walsh accepted that, turned to Marcus. David's going to file custody motion. Probably already in process. Claims Elena's mentally unstable, your dangerous influence. He'll use your PTSD, your isolation, today's punch. Courts tend to favor law enforcement in domestic situations. Marcus knew all this, waited for Walsh to explain why he'd defied his own deputy. Dave Mercer's dirty. Walsh spoke carefully, each word measured. Can't prove it, but I've suspected for years. Complaints get buried, witnesses recant, evidence disappears. He's got friends in the department, probably friends higher up. Taking him down officially would require more resources than I've got. Why tell me this? Because whatever's happening here, Walsh gestured at the family, is better than whatever was happening in his house. I can't give you legal protection, but I can give you time. He'll need 2, maybe 3 weeks to get court orders. Use them wisely. Elena stepped forward, desperation overriding fear. Sheriff, he'll kill us. If he gets custody, if we go back, I believe you, ma'am. But belief doesn't trump law. You need legal counsel, file protective order, get custody evaluation, build official record. Otherwise, you're just running, and you can't run forever. Walsh's pragmatism was infuriating because it was accurate. The legal system moved glacially, favored status quo, required documentation and process. By the time Elena could build a case, David would have them back. And once he had them, no amount of retrospective justice would undo whatever he did. Walsh left them with one final warning. State's sending someone regardless of my cancellation. Social services investigator, Agent Victoria Hayes. She's thorough, professional, and she won't accept easy answers. Be ready. 48 hours later, Victoria Hayes arrived. She was 42, black, impeccably professional in county-issued parka, carrying tablet and credentials. Her expression revealed nothing. No sympathy, no prejudice, no agenda beyond gathering facts. Marcus respected that more than premature compassion. Hayes had seen everything small-town America offered. Abuse, poverty, good people in bad situations, bad people in good disguises. She'd learned not to trust first impressions. Mr. Drake, I'm Agent Hayes, Child Protective Services. I understand you have house guests. Marcus had prepared the cover story, rehearsed it with Elena and the children. Distant cousins, temporary visit, storm trapped them. Everything plausible, nothing provable. My cousin Emma Torres and her children, visiting when the storm hit. Hayes pulled up information on her tablet. Funny, no Emma Torres registered in New Mexico, no birth certificates for these children under that name. Want to try again? The interrogation happened methodically. Hayes separated them, Elena in the cabin, Marcus outside, children with deputies, not David, never David. She asked identical questions, watched for inconsistencies, measured each answer against professional experience. To Elena, why are you here? Visiting family. Which family member specifically? Marcus, my cousin. Maternal or paternal side? Pause. Maternal. Your mother's maiden name? Elena stumbled, recovered. Lopez, Maria Lopez. Hayes made notes without comment. To Maya, do you like staying here? Yes. Why? Because nobody yells, nobody hits. We're safe. Safe from what? Maya's eyes went hard. You know what? Everyone always knows. They just don't care. To Caleb and Connor, is Marcus nice to you? Really nice. He teaches us stuff. What kind of stuff? How to chop wood. How to tell if ice is strong enough. How to find north without a compass. Does he ever get mad? The twins exchanged glances. Connor spoke carefully. Once, when Caleb dropped the pan, but he didn't hit us. He just went outside, then he came back and said sorry. To Grace, who couldn't articulate much, do you like the doggy? Doggy, enthusiastic nod. And Papa? Papa? Papa Marcus. Hayes interviewed Marcus last. Professional distance replaced courteous neutrality. She'd seen the evidence, drawn conclusions, and was now collecting final pieces. Mr. Drake, I've been doing this 18 years. I know manufactured families when I see them. Marcus didn't insult her intelligence with more lies. Then you also know real danger when you see it. Hayes's expression didn't shift. Tell me about David Mercer. You first. You've already investigated. What did you find? Hayes hesitated, then made a choice. 3 complaints filed against him for domestic violence, all withdrawn before prosecution. 2 ex-girlfriends with restraining orders that mysteriously expired. His first wife died in a car accident, single vehicle crash, ruled driver error, but toxicology was never finished. And Elena Torres has a medical record that reads like an abuse textbook. Broken bones, concussions, defensive wounds, all explained as clumsiness. Marcus absorbed that. So you know. I know Elena's terrified. I know these children show classic abuse markers. I know David Mercer is dangerous. Hayes paused. I also know the law requires children be with legal guardian unless court determines otherwise. And right now, David's legal guardian, even though he's abuser. Abuse requires proof, documentation, witnesses willing to testify. Elena's 3 complaints were withdrawn, by her on record. Defense will argue she's unstable, vindictive, making false accusations. The cigarette burns on Maya's arms aren't false. Are they recent? Can we prove David inflicted them? Or will his lawyer claim Elena did it, blamed him, used the injuries to justify kidnapping? Hayes's voice stayed level, professional, but frustration bled through. I hate this as much as you do, but my job isn't deciding who deserves these children. It's determining immediate safety. Are they safer here or with David? Here, obviously, but unless I can document imminent danger that overcomes parental rights, my assessment doesn't matter. Hayes glanced at the cabin, lowered her voice. My sister was killed by her husband. Restraining order, police reports, everything official. He beat her to death in front of their kids 3 days after the divorce finalized. Cops arrested him after. Little late. Understanding passed between them. Hayes had her own ghosts, her own reasons for choosing this work. She'd failed someone she loved, wouldn't fail again if she could prevent it. What do you need? Legally, I need Elena to file emergency custody modification. Get protective order. Request supervised visitation only. Build official record in family court that contradicts David's narrative. Hayes's eyes hardened. Practically, I need him to make a mistake. On record. With witnesses. Something so obvious even his law enforcement friends can't protect him. You're asking me to use Elena and the children as bait. I'm asking you to help them fight instead of hide. Hiding's just slower dying. Marcus recognized his own logic reflected back. He'd told Maya the same thing. Can't run forever. Eventually you turn and fight. But turning required weapons, tactics, terrain advantage. Right now, David held every advantage. How much time before you have to report? I can stretch it to 2 weeks. After that, I'm legally required to file findings. And my findings will say these children are with unrelated adult, no legal custody arrangement, potential kidnapping situation. Even though you know the truth, especially because I know the truth. If I file false report and something happens, I lose my job. Can't help anyone then. Hayes met his gaze. 2 weeks. Get a lawyer, file motions, make this official, or I'll be back with police and I won't have a choice. After Hayes left, Elena collapsed. Not physically, her body remained upright, but something inside her broke. The hope that running would be enough, that distance equaled safety, shattered against Hayes's professional assessment of their situation. We can't win. Her voice was hollow. The system's rigged. David's protected. We're just waiting for him to take them back. Marcus had seen this before. Combat exhaustion. The moment when soldiers realized the mission was impossible, survival unlikely, death probably inevitable. Some broke, some fought harder. The difference was purpose, whether they believed dying mattered. Then we changed the system. You can't change law enforcement, brotherhood. We don't change it, we use it. David thinks his badge makes him untouchable. That's his weakness. Arrogant men make mistakes. Elena wanted to believe him. Maya, listening from the corner, showed more skepticism. What kind of mistakes? The kind where he escalates because he thinks he can, gets violent in public, threatens people with witnesses, shows his true face to someone who matters. He's not stupid. No, but he's desperate, and desperate people get sloppy. Over the next week, Marcus implemented strategy. First, Elena filed legal motions with a pro bono lawyer Margaret Hastings provided. Pro bono because Margaret hated bullies and David Mercer was the worst kind. Protective order, emergency custody modification, supervised visitation only. Paperwork that gave Elena legal standing, forced David into official channels instead of vigilante retrieval. Second, documentation. Dr. Annie Chen examined the children, photographed injuries, wrote detailed medical reports with timelines that matched abuse patterns. Father Brennan provided character witness statements. Sheriff Walsh carefully added observations about David's unusual approach to the cabin. Third, preparation for the inevitable. Because David wouldn't accept legal defeat, he'd escalate. The only question was when and how violent. Marcus taught Elena to shoot. Not to kill, he hoped it wouldn't come to that, but to defend. She resisted initially, hated guns, associated them with David's threats. Marcus understood, but pushed anyway. He's coming. You can be victim or you can be fighter. Choice is yours. Elena chose fighter. Learned grip, stance, sight alignment. Her hands shook the first dozen times, then steadied. Muscle memory replaced fear. By week's end, she could load, fire, clear malfunctions. Not expert level, but competent enough to protect herself if Marcus fell first. The custody hearing happened in a county courtroom that smelled like old wood and institutional disinfectant. Judge Patricia Blackwood presiding, 55, stern, reputation for thorough deliberation and zero tolerance for manipulation. David's lawyer was expensive, polished, prepared. Margaret wore thrift store suit and righteous fury. David testified first. Perfect performance. Concerned father, confused why his wife ran, worried about his children's welfare. He produced medical records showing Elena's depression treatment, therapy notes about paranoid tendencies, 3 withdrawn complaints he characterized as mental health episodes where she blamed me for her pain. His lawyer questioned smoothly. Deputy Mercer, did you ever strike your wife? Never. Harm your children? I would die first. Why do you think Elena ran? David's voice broke convincingly. I think she stopped taking her medication. Her doctor warned this might happen, delusional episodes, persecution complex. I just want her to get help, want my kids safe while she recovers. Cross-examination proved difficult. Margaret attacked, but David had answers for everything. The withdrawn complaints? Elena apologized for making false accusations. The old injuries? Proof of her clumsiness, not his violence. Maya's cigarette burns? He'd never seen them, probably inflicted by Elena during a psychotic break. Elena's testimony started strong, detailed accounts of 7 years of abuse, escalating violence, escape plan executed during the storm. But David's lawyer shredded credibility. Massage. Torres, you have documented depression? Yes, but paranoid ideation noted by your therapist? That was because, David, history of making accusations you later withdrew? I withdrew them because I was scared, or because they were false, based on your illness rather than reality. Elena's composure cracked. Tears came, voice shook, everything David's lawyer needed to paint her as unstable. Marcus watched from gallery, hands clenched, unable to intervene. Then Maya took the stand. At 9 years old, she was technically too young for formal testimony, but Judge Blackwood allowed it, sensing something important. Maya sat straight-backed, voice clear, eyes meeting the judge's directly. Margaret's questions came gently. Maya, tell the judge about your home life before you came to the mountains. Maya described it methodically. The yelling that started around 9 p.m. when David came home drunk. The sounds from her mother's bedroom. Thuds, crying, pleading. The rule that children stayed quiet no matter what. The cigarettes used as punishment for interference. She pulled up her sleeves, showed the burns without flinching. He did these, one for each time I tried to stop him from hurting Mom. He said it was my fault, that if I just stayed in my room like good girls do, he wouldn't have to discipline me. David's lawyer objected, leading questions, coaching, unreliable child witness. Judge Blackwood overruled. The child is articulate and consistent. Continue. Maya described the final night. David choking Elena on the kitchen floor. Maya grabbing a knife from the counter. Stabbing downward into his shoulder, blade sinking deep. David roaring, dropping Elena, turning on Maya with murder in his eyes. Elena gathering consciousness, screaming for the children to run. All 5 of them fleeing into the storm with David's threat following. I'll kill you all. I'll find you and I'll kill you. The courtroom was silent. David's face had gone white, then red, then carefully neutral. His lawyer scrambled. Your Honor, this is clearly fabricated. There's a scar, Maya's voice cut through, on his left shoulder, 3 inches long. He told everyone it was a work injury, but it wasn't. It was Maui. Judge Blackwood looked at David. Deputy Mercer, is there a scar? David's jaw tightened. Yes, but it was a work injury. Remove your shirt. Your Honor, this is remove your shirt or I'll hold you in contempt. David stood slowly, unbuttoned his uniform shirt with controlled fury, revealed the scar on his left shoulder. 3 inches, slightly curved, exactly where a downward knife strike from a 9-year-old's height would land. Margaret produced medical records from the hospital David visited that night, wound consistent with knife injury. David's statement claiming he was injured apprehending a suspect, but no arrest report filed, no suspect named, no follow-up investigation. Because the suspect was his 9-year-old daughter defending her mother's life. Judge Blackwood called recess. 4 hours of deliberation. Marcus sat with Elena in the hallway, holding her hand, feeling her shake. The twins dozed on benches. Maya stared at nothing, exhausted from reliving trauma. Grace played quietly with a toy Dr. Annie brought, oblivious to stakes. When the judge returned, her expression was carved granite. I've reviewed evidence, testimony, and medical documentation. Deputy Mercer, your presentation was compelling, but it was also false. She held up the medical records. This scar tells a story that contradicts every word you spoke. A child doesn't stab a parent unless that parent has become predator. David's lawyer tried to interject. The judge silenced him with a look. Custody granted to Elena Torres, full legal and physical. David Mercer permitted supervised visitation only, in neutral location, with professional supervisor present. Restraining order issued. Deputy Mercer may not approach family home, may not contact Elena, except through legal counsel. David stood, rage breaking through control. This is a miscarriage of justice. Those are my children. Those are children who fear you, children who bear your marks, children who risk death in a blizzard rather than spend one more night under your roof. The judge's voice remained level, implacable. This court's first obligation is child welfare. You failed that obligation catastrophically. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. David pushed through cameras, face twisted with fury. He stopped 10 feet from Marcus, close enough for words to carry. This isn't over. You took my family. I'll take everything from you. Marcus met his gaze steadily. They were never yours. You don't own people. We'll see. David's smile was poison. Legal battle's done, but real war's just starting, and you're not ready for what I'll bring. He left. Marcus knew he was right. Legal victory was just round one. David had lost public battle, would now wage private war. And private wars had no rules, no witnesses, no limits. The question wasn't whether David would strike. The question was how devastating the blow would be when it landed. 3 months transformed the cabin from survival shelter into home. Marcus added a second room, constructed with lumber. Frank Morrison hauled up the mountain and expertise earned through years of carpentry. The twins shared bunk beds they'd helped sand and stain, their names carved into the wood frame. Maya claimed a corner for her art supplies, walls gradually filling with drawings that showed less violence, more imagination. Grace's toddler bed sat near the window where she could watch Ranger patrol the property each morning. Elena had gained 15 pounds, cheekbones no longer knife-sharp, eyes holding light instead of perpetual shadows. Her frostbitten fingers recovered full sensation. The compulsive window checking faded to occasional vigilance. She cooked meals that filled the cabin with warmth, chicken stew, fresh bread, vegetables from the small greenhouse Marcus built. Real food, abundant food, food that wasn't rationed or earned through compliance. The children thrived in ways that made their previous malnutrition starkly visible by contrast. Caleb had grown 2 inches, his voice louder, opinions forming without fear of correction. Connor laughed freely now, no longer the silent twin. Maya's drawings evolved from shadowy horrors to intricate landscapes, mountains and wildlife rendered with technical skill that made Father Brennan suggest art school someday. Grace spoke in full sentences, vocabulary expanding daily, her favorite phrase becoming, "Watch me, Papa," before attempting new physical feat. Marcus found himself teaching constantly, how to read weather patterns in cloud formations, how to split wood along the grain, how to track animals by disturbed snow and scat analysis. The twins absorbed everything, competed for his attention in ways that reminded him achingly of Benjamin. Maya learned with focused intensity, as though practical skills were armor against future threats. Elena watched these lessons with gratitude edged by guilt. Guilt that her children found in a stranger what their biological father never provided. The teaching became ritual, structure replacing chaos. Every morning after breakfast, Marcus took whoever was interested on mountain walks. Caleb collected pine cones obsessively, pockets bulging, sorting them by size and shape on the cabin porch. Connor preferred rocks, examining each one with geologist's focus, asking questions about minerals and erosion that Marcus answered with patient detail. Maya carried a sketchbook everywhere, documenting what she saw: deer tracks in snow, hawks circling overhead, the exact way frost formed on window panes. Her drawings grew more confident, less about capturing trauma and more about recording beauty. She'd started a series on Ranger, the dog sleeping, the dog alert, the bum playing with grace, the bum aging gracefully. Each sketch was love letter and documentation simultaneously. Grace's favorite lesson was talking to trees. She'd press small hands against bark, close her eyes, announce what the tree was thinking. This one is lonely, she'd say seriously, or this one likes snow. Marcus never corrected her, recognizing that imagination was its own kind of survival skill, the ability to see magic in ordinary things, to find companionship in solitude, to believe the world held more than cruelty. Elena joined when she could, learning alongside her children. She'd never had father who taught her practical skills, never had childhood that allowed exploration without fear. Now at 30, she was discovering what she'd missed, the satisfaction of competent hands, the pride of mastering something new, the simple joy of walking through forest without checking behind every tree for threats. These weren't just survival lessons. They were reclamation of stolen childhoods, construction of new memories to replace old horrors, proof that fathers could teach without terrorizing, that learning happened through patience rather than punishment. Age and Hayes visited monthly, official inspections that became increasingly perfunctory. She documented home improvements, photographed the children's healthy weight gain, interviewed each family member separately. Her reports praised the stable environment, noted Marcus's PTSD was well managed through therapy, recommended continued placement, pending legal resolution. Between official lines, Hayes's approval was obvious. These children were healing. That mattered more than paperwork. Marcus formally filed adoption paperwork in late March. By April, spring runoff would turn streams into roaring torrents. But now snow still held the high country. Margaret Hastings handled the legal work, assured him the process was straightforward, given Elena's enthusiastic consent and the children's obvious attachment. Home study scheduled for April. Court date for finalization in May. Administrative steps that would make love official, protection permanent. Elena wore his grandmother's ring on her left hand, thin gold band Marcus retrieved from a safety deposit box he'd ignored for 3 years. He'd proposed quietly one evening after the children slept, kneeling beside the wood stove where she folded laundry. I want this to be real. Not just protection, not just legal strategy. Real. Elena's hand stilled on a tiny sock, Grace's sock, worn but clean. You love me or you love saving me? Both. Can't separate them. You came to my door dying. I was dying too, just slower. We saved each other. Her yes came with tears, kisses, promises whispered against his mouth. They would marry before the adoption finalized. Build family together, officially, irrevocably. Father Brennan agreed to perform the ceremony, suggested June when wildflowers bloomed across mountain meadows. But between March and June lay David's criminal trial. 3 charges: attempted murder of Marcus during the siege, assault with deadly weapon, solicitation of murder through the hitman arrangement he'd attempted from county jail. The trial had been delayed twice. David's expensive lawyers filing continuances, challenging evidence, building defense. Finally, Judge Blackwood set firm date, May 15th, no more delays. Marcus attended Veterans Affairs Support Group twice weekly now, small gathering in Silverbrook Community Center. 10 local vets, various wars, common thread of trauma, poorly addressed by institutions designed to create soldiers but not rehabilitate them. Marcus shared his story incrementally. Afghanistan, Rachel's death, the cabin isolation, the rescue that became salvation. Other vets shared their struggles. Bonds formed. He started Mountain Hope nonprofit in April, modest operation funded by his military disability payments, and small grants Father Brennan helped secure. The mission: connect veterans with mental health resources, job training, housing assistance. Marcus couldn't save everyone, but he could create pathways for those willing to walk them. 3 vets found employment through his network. One reconnected with a estranged daughter. Another entered residential treatment for addiction. Small victories, meaningful ones. The work gave Marcus purpose beyond family protection. He'd spent 3 years believing survival meant isolation, that caring invited loss. Elena and the children taught him different truth. Isolation was death, connection was risk, but risk was the price of living. Purpose wasn't something found in mountain solitude. It was forged through service, built through relationships, earned by choosing to stand when falling felt easier. David's trial began under gray skies that threatened rain. The courthouse steps swarmed with media, local reporters, true crime bloggers, activists drawn by the case's intersection of domestic violence and law enforcement corruption. Deputies' abuse exposed, victims' courage celebrated, systems' complicity questioned. The story had every element modern audiences craved. Marcus sat behind the prosecution table with Elena, Margaret, and Sheriff Walsh. The twins stayed with Dr. Annie, deemed too young for courtroom trauma. Maya insisted on attending, her testimony crucial to the attempted murder charge. Grace remained blissfully ignorant of proceedings, playing with Ranger at Frank Morrison's house. David entered in civilian clothes, his lawyer having advised against wearing the uniform that once symbolized authority. He looked diminished without the badge, ordinary, almost forgettable, but his eyes still held that calculating cruelty, measuring everyone in the room for weakness and opportunity. The prosecution opened methodically. David Mercer, sheriff's deputy for 11 years, husband for 7, father of 4, abuser for all of it. Evidence presented in chronological order. Medical records showing Elena's injuries, witness testimony about complaints filed and withdrawn, Maya's scarred arms photographed in clinical detail. The cigarette burns formed constellation of horror that prosecution argued demonstrated premeditation, sadism, sustained torture of a child. David's lawyer countered with mental health defense. Elena's documented depression, her paranoid tendencies, the 3 withdrawn complaints characterized as false accusations made during psychotic episodes. He suggested Elena inflicted Maya's burns herself, blamed David, manufactured abuse narrative to justify kidnapping. The wounds were real, but the perpetrator wasn't David. It was unstable mother seeking escape from reality. The jury, 6 women, 6 men, ages ranging from 23 to 68, listened with expressions Marcus couldn't read. Small-town Colorado, where law enforcement was respected, where domestic disputes were private matters, where women's accusations faced skepticism as default. Convincing them required more than evidence, required them to see past the uniform to the monster beneath. Elena testified on day 2, second time facing her abuser across official proceedings. Margaret prepared her carefully, warned her David's lawyer would attack credibility again. Elena wore modest dress, minimal makeup, wedding ring Marcus gave her. She answered questions with quiet strength, voice steady despite visible trembling. Margaret guided her through the timeline. First date with David, his charm and attentiveness. Engagement after 6 months, wedding at City Hall. First incident 3 weeks after marriage. Argument about dinner, David's hand around her throat. Apology that followed with promises of change. 7 years of escalation. Slaps becoming punches. Punches becoming chokings. Chokings becoming threats with service weapon pressed to her temple. Why didn't you leave sooner? Margaret's question anticipated the defense. Elena's answer was simple, devastating. I tried 3 times. Police brought me back. David was their friend, their colleague. I was the hysterical wife. Who would believe me? Cross-examination proved brutal. David's lawyer, expensive suit, practiced sympathy, probed every inconsistency, exploited every moment of hesitation. Ms. Torres, you testified my client threatened you with his service weapon, yet you never reported this to his superiors? I was afraid. Afraid or lying? Because there's no evidence this threat occurred. No witnesses, no reports, just your word against a decorated officer. Elena's composure cracked. Tears came despite preparation, despite determination. Marcus watched her hands grip the witness stand, knuckles white, and felt helpless rage at being unable to intervene. Margaret's redirect salvaged what she could, but damage was done. David's lawyer had planted reasonable doubt, suggested Elena's entire narrative was fabrication born of mental illness and vindictiveness. The jury's expressions shifted, some showing skepticism, others' confusion. Conviction required certainty beyond reasonable doubt. David's lawyer was building reasonable mountains. Then the prosecution called surprise witness, James Jimmy Falco, career criminal with face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen every dark corner society offered. He shuffled to the stand in prison orange, shackled but confident, man with nothing to lose and everything to gain through cooperation. The prosecutor established credentials, Jimmy's lengthy record, current incarceration on weapons charges, plea deal offered in exchange for testimony. Then came the hammer. Mr. Falco, do you know the defendant? Yeah, David Mercer hired me 2 months ago. Hired you for what purpose? Jimmy's voice was matter of fact, describing murder the way others might describe grocery shopping. To kill Marcus Drake and Elena Torres, make it look like accident. Mercer offered 50 grand, half up front, half on completion. The courtroom erupted. Judge Blackwood's gavel cracked like gunshot. Demanding order. David's lawyer objected. Hearsay, unreliable witness, testimony bought through plea bargain. The judge allowed it, instructed jury to weigh credibility carefully. The prosecutor produced evidence. Recorded phone calls from county jail where David awaited trial. Inmate phone monitoring had captured everything. David's voice was unmistakable on playback, filtered through prison phone system but clear enough. First call, Jimmy, it's Dave. Need that favor we discussed. The veteran and my wife, soon as possible. Second call, 50,000 cash. Half in your sister's account now, half when it's done. Clean job, no connections back to me. Third call, I don't care how. Car accident, house fire, whatever looks natural. Just make sure they're gone before the wedding. The recordings played through courtroom speakers. Elena's fingernails drew blood from Marcus's palm. 4 crescent moons in his skin. He didn't pull away. Her breathing came too fast, shallow gasps that meant panic approaching. Marcus shifted closer, solid presence against her trembling. Maya sat motionless behind them, face carved from stone. But her hands gripped the armrest so tightly the wood creaked, knuckles bone white. She'd known, had always known David was capable of this. The confirmation did not shock her, it vindicated her, justified every nightmare, every moment of hypervigilance, every knife she'd hidden and carried. The jury leaned forward, 12 faces showing identical revulsion. The woman in seat 3 had tears streaming down her face. The man in seat 7 looked physically ill, hand covering his mouth. The young woman in seat 1, barely 25, stared at David with the particular horror of someone realizing monsters wore human faces. David sat frozen at the defense table, his lawyer's pen hovering uselessly above a legal pad. No notes could salvage this. No objection could erase his voice plotting murder with clinical precision. The mask had finally, irrevocably shattered. Jimmy Falco watched from the witness stand with something approaching satisfaction. He was career criminal, no illusions about his own morality. But even he understood the hierarchy of evil, and men who terrorized children occupied the bottom rung. David sat frozen, his lawyer frantically scribbling notes, searching for defense against defendant's own recorded words. Jimmy continued testimony with detailed specificity. David contacted him through mutual associate, former inmate David had arrested years ago. Negotiated price, timeline, method. Provided Marcus's address, Elena's routine, suggestions for staging accidents. The $50,000 first payment cleared into Jimmy's sister's account exactly when he claimed. Bank records confirmed it. Prosecution provided documentation. Defense tried damage control during cross-examination. Mr. Falco, you're a convicted felon with extensive history of fraud. Why should this jury believe anything you say? Jimmy shrugged. Don't have to believe me. Believe the recordings. That's Dave's voice talking about killing people. I'm just the guy who was supposed to do it. You're testifying to reduce your own sentence. Convenient timing, isn't it? Sure, it's convenient, but convenient don't mean false. Dave hired me to commit murder. I took his money. Then I got arrested before I could follow through. That's just facts. The jury leaned forward, engaged now, skepticism shifting toward conviction. Recorded evidence was powerful. David's own voice plotting murder, captured by the same law enforcement system he'd corrupted, turned against him with bureaucratic efficiency. David's lawyer called recess, needed time to strategize. But strategy options were limited when defendants' voice planned murder on official recordings. They could challenge admissibility, question chain of custody, attack Jimmy's credibility. But they couldn't erase David's words, couldn't explain away the specificity, couldn't counter the bank records showing payment. When court resumed, David took the stand against his lawyer's advice. Desperate move, final gambit, attempt to salvage something from catastrophic testimony. He wore practiced contrition, voice breaking strategically. I was angry, hurt. My wife left me, took my children, destroyed my reputation. I said things I didn't mean. Empty threats made in moment of pain. The prosecutor's cross-examination was surgical. Empty threats? You transferred $25,000 to a convicted felon. I was emotionally compromised. You provided detailed instructions on how to stage the murders. I wasn't thinking clearly. 3 separate phone calls over 2 weeks suggest sustained planning, not momentary lapse. David's composure fractured. The mask of concerned father, wronged husband, honorable officer dissolved under prosecutorial pressure. What remained was raw fury, entitlement, urge at being held accountable. They're mine! His voice rose, control shattering. Elena's mine. The children are mine. Everything I built is mine. Drake had no right. No right to what? Save their lives? No right to take my family. The prosecutor's voice went quiet, letting David's outburst resonate. So you hired someone to kill them. David realized his mistake too late. The courtroom had heard his possessiveness, his rage, his fundamental belief that people could be owned and destroyed if they sought freedom. The jury's faces showed revulsion, understanding finally clicking into place. This wasn't wronged husband. This was predator whose prey escaped. David's lawyer tried rehabilitation during redirect, but damage was terminal. David had confessed on the stand, admitted to everything except framing it as justice. The jury didn't need more deliberation. They'd seen enough. Closing arguments happened the next morning. Prosecution summarized evidence. 7 years of abuse, escalating violence, attempted murder for hire, defendant's own recorded confession. Defense argued mental health crisis, emotional breakdown, crimes of passion rather than premeditation. Neither mattered much. The case was decided when David's voice played through speakers, plotting murder with clinical detachment. Jury deliberated 3 hours. Returned with unanimous verdict. Attempted murder of Marcus Drake, guilty. Assault with deadly weapon, guilty. Solicitation of murder, guilty. Historical abuse charges, guilty on 7 counts. David showed no emotion. His face was blank slate, mask firmly reapplied, retreating behind walls that had protected him for decades. But his hands clenched the table hard enough to whiten knuckles, betraying fury underneath. Sentencing phase followed immediately. Prosecution recommended life without parole, argued David's law enforcement background made him uniquely dangerous. His betrayal of public trust warranted maximum penalty. Defense pleaded for mercy, suggested 20 years with possibility of parole, claimed David could rehabilitate. Judge Blackwood reviewed documents in silence that stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, she looked up, addressed David directly. Deputy Mercer, you wore a badge that symbolizes protection and service. You violated that trust catastrophically. You terrorized your family for 7 years. You attempted to have them murdered when they escaped. This court finds you represent ongoing danger to society. She paused, letting weight settle. Sentence on attempted murder charge. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Sentences on remaining charges to run consecutively. Total 125 years. David would die in prison. The only question was when. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Elena declined interviews, too emotionally exhausted to speak. Maya gave brief statement, voice clear and steady. Justice happened today. That almost never happens for kids like us. I hope other children see this and know telling the truth matters. Fighting back matters. Surviving matters. Marcus stood with his arm around Elena, shielding her from cameras, providing physical barrier between his family and the world's curiosity. They drove home in silence, children waiting at the cabin with Father Brennan and Dr. Annie. When they arrived, Grace ran to Marcus first. "Papa, you're home." That simple greeting, delivered with toddler certainty, broke something in Marcus that had remained frozen since the trial began. He knelt, gathered Grace into his arms, felt her tiny hands pat his face. "Yes, baby, Papa's home, and we're safe now, all of us." The wedding happened 2 weeks later on a Saturday when mountain weather cooperated. 80 guests assembled in the meadow behind the cabin. Father Brennan, Dr. Annie, Sheriff Walsh, Agent Hayes, Margaret Hastings, the veterans from Marcus's support group, community members who'd rallied around the family. Frank Morrison and Evelyn Thompson, who'd quietly begun dating after Frank's wife's death 5 years prior, helped arrange seating and decorations. Maya served as maid of honor, wearing dress Dr. Annie helped her choose. Purple fabric that made her look suddenly older. Beautiful, no longer the terrified child who'd arrived in a blizzard. The twins acted as ring bearers, matching suits purchased by Father Brennan, Caleb carrying rings with exaggerated seriousness, while Connor giggled nervously. Grace was flower girl, assigned to scatter petals down the makeshift aisle. Instead, she abandoned her basket halfway, ran to Marcus with petals clutched in fists, presented them directly to him with proud announcement, "Flowers for Papa." Laughter rippled through assembled guests. Marcus accepted the crumpled petals, kissed Grace's forehead, passed her to Maya, who guided her back to Elena's side. The ceremony itself was brief, Father Brennan officiating with words about wilderness and redemption, families forged through crisis, love as choice rather than accident. Marcus wore his dress uniform, first time in 3 years, medals polished, bearing straight. The uniform represented who he'd been before grief broke him. Wearing it now felt like honoring both past and future. The soldier who served, the man who learned to live again. Elena wore simple white dress she'd sewn herself, wildflowers woven into her dark hair, radiance that came from safety rather than cosmetics. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was free. 3 years of terror ended, future opening like summer meadow before them. Father Brennan had asked them to write their vows separately without consulting each other. "Let the words come from individual hearts," he'd advised. "Truth needs no coordination." Marcus had spent 3 nights writing, crossing out, rewriting. Everything sounded insufficient. How did you summarize resurrection in sentences? How did you promise forever when you'd already lost forever once? Finally, he'd realized the truth was simple. Love wasn't grand declarations. It was showing up daily, choosing presence over absence, connection over isolation. He looked at Elena, saw the woman who'd knocked in a blizzard and refused to let him stay dead. Saw the mother who'd risked everything to save her children. Saw the partner who understood that healing wasn't linear, that some days were harder than others, that strength meant asking for help instead of suffering alone. His vows emerged steady, sure. Marcus's vows were brief. "Elena, you knocked on my door when I'd given up. You gave me reason to wake up, reason to fight, reason to remember what living means. I promise to protect you, honor you, stand with you through every storm. I promise to love these children as my own, because they are my own in every way that matters. That I promise to keep choosing life, choosing us, every day I have left." Father Brennan smiled, rare warmth breaking through his chaplain's formality. "These vows honor not just the love between you, but the hard work it took to get here. Marriage isn't just promise, it's daily choice. You've both proven you know how to choose wisely, even when choosing is hardest." Elena's voice shook but held. "Marcus, you opened the door when anyone else would have turned away. You saved my children's lives. You saved mine. You taught me that strength isn't just surviving, it's trusting someone enough to stop surviving alone. I promise to stand beside you through flashbacks and nightmares and hard days. I promise to